What's up, everyone? My name is Chris and Fanzon, and you're listening to the Hidden Doors podcast. Upcoming, I have my book review for Ray Dalio's new book. It's called The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. If you like what you hear, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date on more videos and podcasts and book reviews coming down like this. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so we have the book review for Ray Dalio's new book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. Ray Dalio is the founder and co-chairman of Bridgewater Associates, which over the last 40 years has become the largest and best performing hedge fund in the world. He's the #1 New York Times bestseller and a #1 Amazon Business Book of the Year. Principles. He has the #1 Amazon Book of the Year. It's called Principles. Ray Dalio has appeared on the Time 100 list of the most influential people in the world, as well as the Bloomberg Markets list of the 50 most influential people. He lives with his family in Connecticut. Ray Dalio is a beast. This guy has a lot of influence, and he knows how the world works, especially when it comes to finance. He published this book in 2021 of November 30th to be exact. There's 559 pages in this book. The price is $16.99 for a Kindle and $21 for a hardcover. And as of this podcast, it's been on the Amazon charts. It's number 15. It's been 8 weeks on the list. So this is a good book. And a couple things. One is Ray Dalio. The reason I feel like the way he thinks is in alignment with how I think. I think it tends to be a little skewed towards left brain thinking. He likes to think of principles always. Principles or inputs that influence and impact the outputs. And this comes into play. He is a really good investor. He does global investing, and he finds the inputs or the principles that influence the markets, and he ranks all these things, puts them in his own index so he can rate how we should invest, and then he uses this to make good investments. He applies the same kind of thinking though, not just for investing, but I think for everything that he does. And I like that type of thinking where to make the best decision, let me rank all these variables that have an influence on this output. Let me see what the output is, because if you have 20 variables that might influence in a country, let's say, like this country, should I invest in this currency? Well, I don't know. Here are all the 20 variables or 18 variables that might impact it. Your brain can't process all that, but when you put that into a computer and you rank them all and you have very specific metrics on how to rank them and you have this output, it gives you a clear idea of how to make a better decision. And he has influenced me from this book to apply this to my work, not with investing, but other work decisions that I have to make. When you have so many options on the table, how do you know what to do? Well, find your inputs, rank them, all the variables that might make your decision better or worse, and then you'll come to a nice decision. He does this with everything. So he has a few books out, but this book, Changing World Order, and you might say, why is this book review on a self-development channel? Why is that? Well, the first thing is because I think, like I mentioned, the inputs, if you can think like that, where you have to make a decision and there's many things that you can do, ranking all of your variables will lead to a better decision. And that's just improving yourself, improving the way that you think. 2 is this book talks a lot about history. Ray Dalio's researched, I believe, over the last couple thousand years and looked at the empires and countries that have evolved over time. And I think it is so important to understand history because I have a big thing on this. Culture changes, technology changes, laws change, societies change, clothes change, fashion changes, but people don't. People really don't change. Like they're just the same people they were 2,000 years ago, just with a lot more technology and knowledge, but their emotions are the same. They react the same way to certain situations. We like to think we're this sophisticated group of high fashion technology people, but if you slapped someone 2,000 years ago in the face and you slap someone now in the face, same reactions. We're just human beings, and we have alligator brains. We just technically have more sophisticated technology, and we have evolved with our knowledge and our understanding of the world and ourselves, but we're still humans. And so understanding history, which is what Dalio has done in this book, is so important for understanding the present and the future. So he's looked over the past 500 years, I think, for empires, and then over the last 1,200 years when he's looking at the China empires, because the Chinese empires, I think, have lasted longer. And he's used that to understand what will happen in the future. And this is what this book is all about. And Ray Dalio uses his key variables or indicators, whatever you want to call them, the inputs. There's 18 of them. I don't want to list every single one of them because I really don't even remember them, but they're the key inputs that influence a country's main cycle. And when I say a cycle, a country they're doing really well or they're doing really bad. Countries usually go through these main 5 cycles that I'm going to go through in a second. But like, for example, China is upcoming. It's upcoming and it's probably close to its peak. But Ray has these variables or principles or whatever you want to call them. He calls them key indicators, 18 key indicators that will help him determine when a country is on its downfall or upfall, and where is it on the key cycle that he talks about. And a lot of the work that Ray Dalio writes about, he also has like YouTube videos. I love this guy. This guy's creating great content to help inform people. It's not just for the broader population. He does this a lot also to inform politicians. So almost all of the work that he's ever done, a YouTube video, a book, go to his website. He also mentions this is also to help politicians make the right decisions, because our politicians sometimes are like, they're duly elected. I get it. But, are they the most knowledgeable about things? Are they more knowledgeable at Ray Dalio, who is I don't want to say perfected, but really refined global investing and understands how these economic cycles actually impact a country's ability to govern? Because once the stuff hits the fan, I don't want to say the SHIT word because I don't want to get, I don't know. I don't want to get flagged on YouTube. But once the stuff hits the fan, with their finances of a country and to get over indebted and all this stuff, that the finance impact also impacts the country. Stuff might end in revolution, civil wars. So Ray Dalio has a really good insight to this. To someone who may be duly elected, maybe has all the good intentions for helping people, who, I don't know, look at a lot of these politicians who really have no idea what the hell they're doing. Do they have a better insight than Ray Dalio? No. So he likes to also build content for them. So if you're a politician, you're listening to this, listen to Ray Dalio. He's got some good stuff that'll help you govern. Okay, so he's helping inform politicians. Now, he talks about these 5 stages. This is like, I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I had is that there's 5 stages. I don't want to talk about every little thing in this book, but the 5 stages are the cycles that countries or empires usually go through. It's like they start off poor, then they're at their peak, and then they, boom, crash, and then the cycle starts over again. And usually at the crash is like revolution, civil wars, and they start at stage 1 again. But there's 5 stages. And he talks about, where the U.S. and where China is on these stages. He also talks about, where are the hot points, or the points that you should really pay attention to, like Taiwan, when it comes to the relationship with China and US. And he also talks about, like, when countries are on the same cycle, in a sense, right? US is on the almost downward cycle, China's on the almost upward cycle. Does that cause tension between these two countries? In a lot of the cases in history, it does. And so what do you have to look out for? So he talks a lot about these types of things. The 5 cycles are: number 1, the people and the country are poor, and they think of themselves as poor. That is stage 1. You are a poor country and you know you're poor. Stage 1 of the cycle. Usually stage 3 is like your peak. Stage 5 is like your downfall. So stage 1 is you are poor and you know you're poor. You have low incomes. You're on subsistence lives. You live subsistence lives. So you don't waste money. You don't take on a lot of debt. And that helps you move to the next stage, which, typically hard work gradually accumulates. You gradually save more, and your hard work gradually accumulates. So you have more than you need to survive. So you're really good at saving. So now you accumulate more savings. So that brings you to stage 2, where the people in the country are rich. Ooh, let's get some rich money in there, but you still see yourselves as poor. And that means the countries in this stage, you experience rapidly rising incomes and productivity growth at the same time. They still work hard, these people in these countries. They sell a lot to foreigners. They save a lot. They invest in efficient assets. And because of all this, they become much more productive. And when big countries go into this stage, they're typically emerging into great world powers. I believe China was just recently in the stage. Then they go to stage 3. So stage 3 is the people in the country are rich and they see themselves as rich. So now they're rich and they know it. Those rich sons of bees. So their incomes are high. The labor becomes more expensive. Previous investments are still paying off from a productivity standpoint. The priorities shift from hard work and saving to enjoying the good things in life. So things like arts and science typically become more funded. And the new generation is born without ever experiencing the bad times. That's like the generation in the United States, people who haven't experienced the wars or the depressions or the really hard times. That's like you guys or me. We're living in the good times actually, I don't know if we're in this stage yet, so I could be wrong. But that is how you start having people who overspend and overconsume because, you had never experienced the extremely tough times of having to live on I can't say that damn word, subsistence lives. That's how you start to overconsume and stuff. So countries in this stage are almost always large economic and military powers to protect their global interests. The U.S. was in this stage from 1950 to 1965. China is now moving into it. So China was stage 2, moving into stage 3. They're becoming rich, and they know they're rich, those sons of bees. Okay, stage 4. People and countries are poor, and they see themselves as rich. This is what happens. You're rich, you see yourselves as rich, and now you're poor, but you still see yourself as rich. That's when you overconsume and you get a lot of debt. That is where the U.S. is right now. We think that we can just spend, borrow, and that'll last forever because we don't know any other way. Wait until stage 5 hits us, people. Stop spending like crazy. So in stage 4, where people and countries are poor, but they see themselves as rich, debt rises relative to income. People in these countries spend a lot and earn a lot, and they become expensive with slow real income growth rates. They're reluctant to reduce their spending in line with reduced income rates. So their savings rate declines, their debt increases, and they cut corners. Don't cut those corners. They appear to be rich because of the high spending, but their balance sheets are deteriorating. Reduced investments in efficient assets slows their productivity gains. Cities and infrastructure become older. They increasingly rely on reputation rather than their actual competitiveness. Countries typically spend a lot of military in this stage so they can protect their global interests. Levels of debt cannot be paid back with non-depreciated money, And big countries who go through this stage are typically declining as great empires. Okay, that is where the U.S. is. So, oh, wait a second. Maybe the U.S. is not in stage 4. The U.S. might even be in stage 5, according to Ray Dalio. You're gonna have to read this damn book and confirm yourself. Stage 5. People and the people in the country are poor and they see themselves as poor. So this is when the reality hits, folks. You spent all you had and you are broke, and now you can't even pretend in your head like you're rich. You know you're broke, the country and the people in the country. So the bubble bursts, the devaluations occur, central governments print money. There are poor economic conditions and low interest rates. They have to compete with less expensive and more productive countries. That's hard to do. That's how do you do that? Well, how do you justify compete? How can you compete with a country that's more productive and they're cheaper? That's not easy and that's hard for the labor force. Countries in this stage see their power declining further. The cycle eventually restarts at stage 1. Revolutions and civil wars are common at this stage. So, again, I'm not going to say the word, but stuff hits the fan. Stuff hits the fan at this stage. Those are the 5 cycles, right? You, to re-summarize really quickly, you're poor and you think of yourself as poor. Then you're rich, but you still think of yourself as poor. So you are invested in capital. You're not having high debt up to a point where then you're rich and you look at yourself as rich. So you spend like a maniac, and then you are poor, but you think you're rich until the point where you're so poor that you know you're poor. And then it restarts in a cycle. This is what Ray Dalio talks about. These are what normal empires go through. So if the U.S., what I think is in stage 5, and you're in the U.S., you got to think about these types of things. This is why history is important to look at. I don't have a great perspective. I can't tell you if Ray Dalio is going to be correct or not. But what I understand is Ray Dalio has looked at the history way more than I did. He's talked to leaders and experts way more than me or probably anyone listening to this podcast has. So he has an idea of what the hell's going on. We cannot just live in this fantasy world where we think everything's going to be perfect. And, that's maybe why there's such high stress in this country. It's like we always thinks everything's going to be perfect. Then as soon as something bad happens, it's like, oh, man, it's the end of the world. Stuff is going to happen, and we need to be prepared for it mentally with how we hold our leaders accountable. We need to start being prepared and think about this type of stuff. So the U.S. is, according to my notes here, unless I took my notes wrong, they're in stage 5. This is when bad financial conditions and intensifying conflict at the same time happen. The leading empire still has other great strengths like technology and military that are declining on a relative basis. So classically, the stage comes after periods of great excesses in spending and debt and the widening of wealth and political gaps, and before there are revolutions and civil wars. That's what we got to watch out for, these big wealth gaps in this country. You got billionaires and then people who can barely pay the rent. How is that even possible? And that's what causes resentment. That's what causes uprisings. You got to watch out for these indicators. And so based on what Ray Dalio has seen in the past, they estimate that there's a number of factors that go into a country going into like some kind of like revolution or civil war. But they estimate that when there are 60 to 80% of the red flags present, so red flags, call them variables, whatever you want, there is a 1 in 6 chance of severe internal conflict. When lots of these conditions are in place, greater than 80%, there's around a 1 in 3 chance of civil war or revolution. So it's not very probable, but still too probable for comfort. The U.S. is in a 60 to 80% bucket today, so 1 in 6 chance. Again, that's just statistics based on what they've seen in the past. Things are different now than they are in the past, but who knows? it certainly seems like there's a very possible chance of internal conflict. That's why I think people need to. Yeah, you know what? I don't have all the answers. I'm not gonna pretend like I do. But now a lot of this book made me think a lot about digital currencies because Ray Dalio talks about how once a nation or empire loses all of its power and they're in that stage where they're in the last stage and they're high in debt, they know they're poor and they're poor. The currency lags a little bit. Because right now the U.S. currency is usually right now is like the reserve currency around the world. Most central banks, I think it's like over 50% of the reserved currencies in the world are U.S. dollars, and that means the U.S. has a lot of power because there's a lot of the currency that the U.S. Prints is used around the world. And so that means your reserved currency, and that reserved currency status usually lasts a little past, it lags a little bit. So even if you're poor and you know you're poor, everyone still has the currency. It's almost like language. Everyone might be talking English because that's been the status quo or how you do business. But eventually another currency may take over and the US dollar might not be worth much. Look, we're over 20, I think $28 trillion in debt. What? How is that even possible? That's the US government. So the dollar is, I don't know how strong, and we'll have to see. It's going through serious inflation because of recent events with COVID, and we had to print a lot and to, help people, but it's a strange thing that's happening. So it made me think more and more about digital currencies. The whole thing was a lot of that's talked about is that the the way that currency works is it's a lot more stable when it's tied to a hard currency. So like the dollar, it was tied to gold. So you could trade your dollar in and you get a certain amount of gold back. So like the dollar in a sense was just like a note. A note to say that you could get back a certain amount of gold. The gold was something that actually had the value, not the paper. The paper was just saying, "Hey, this is my amount of gold that I can get if I want to get my gold." And gold is the thing that had value. But then they had to, I think in 1971 they got off of the gold standard and it was just paper then. And then, that causes, once you get off that hard currency, right? There's only a certain amount of gold in the world. So that means you can only have a certain amount of money. If everyone tried to get, if you had the same equivalent of money in gold, you would be able to always get your gold back. But then as you print and print and print and print and print, you have way more paper than there's gold. So if everyone wanted to go get their gold, they wouldn't be able to. So you have to break the link of gold and paper money. Once you break that link, you could, there's no gold standard anymore. You can print money and you just cause inflation. So you have less stability. When you have less stability, usually, I think what I understand from this book is that people tend to go back, countries, central governments tend to have to go back to hard currencies to get things stable. So does that mean digital currencies come into play? Because in my head, it's like cryptocurrencies have a limited amount. You can have a limited amount of cryptocurrencies, what I understand, and it's digital, so it's easy to carry around, and the technology behind it, I think, is very hard to take money from somebody else. I think with the blockchain technology, it's very sophisticated. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we ever go back to a hard currency, does that open the chance of being that hard currency make a cryptocurrency? Could be. To me, cryptocurrencies is like it's like digital gold. It's easier to carry than gold. I don't even know why gold is worth anything because I don't even know what you could make of it. It's just, for some reason, we've always found value in gold. But if digital currencies are easy to carry around. It could be like a digital gold. Again, take this with, I have no idea what I'm talking about here. Ray Dalio probably has a really good sense, but he doesn't really bring up cryptocurrencies at all in this book. And this book review has been going on for 25 minutes, so maybe a little, almost 25 minutes. Let's cool it down. Let's stop here. Go get Ray Dalio's book. He talks a lot about the economic cycles countries go through, and he gives you an idea of what to expect for the future based on what has happened in the past. He has good insight when it comes to global economics. He has really good insight with global finance. He understands how finance works. He understands how government policies impact countries, how when you're in these bubbles, what are the best ways to go about it. I will never be able to have the brain Ray Dalio has when it comes to this stuff, but I can read his book and understand it a little better. And that's why I think it's so important, regardless if you're into finance and all that stuff. In self-development, it's really good to understand history and how that will impact you in the future. Otherwise, we're all just, sitting here as an ignorant population. In order for your representatives to be held accountable, you need to be informed as well. So let's all get informed and let's read. So go get Ray Dalio's book. I'll put a link in the description so you can go click into it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take it easy. Read, improve, enjoy your day. Take it easy, and I will see you next time. Bye.